This podcast is sponsored by AXA Farm Insurance. AXA offers tailored cover to fit your unique needs, whether it's public liability or protection for your family home, outbuildings or farm vehicles. Based in Athlone, the AXA Farm team of agri-specialists and regional managers work together to ensure you receive the seamless support you need. Switching to AXA is easy thanks to an innovative online service that enables you to quickly and easily find the best cover for your needs. For more information, head to AXA.ie. AXA Insurance DAC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to the Farming Week, the news podcast brought to you by Agriland in association with AXA Insurance. I'm Stella Meehan and I'm joined by my colleague Aisling O'Brien to run through the top stories in agriculture over the past week. Firstly, Aisling, let's talk about Taoiseach Simon Harris, who attended the IFA Farming and Food Conference in the Curragh. Now, obviously, there is a general election in the offing, so what was his offering to farmers today?
Well, first things first, he didn't offer us an election date, Stella. We're still waiting for that. The good money's still on November 29th by all accounts, but the campaign is definitely in full swing at this stage. Simon Harris again pledged today to listen to and work with farmers, and he said that his party, Fine Gael, has a collective passionate belief in the future of farming and rural Ireland. And he also said how together they would work hard together to secure that future for farming and for people living in rural Ireland. Now, there was a round of applause when the Taoiseach said that farming is the backbone of the Irish economic model and it needs to be treated with respect. He said that farmers were custodians of the land, but he acknowledged how farmers felt that they had been vilified. And he said that it was time to stop looking at the sector through just one prism. He said there is a climate emergency going on, but it's not the sole responsibility of farmers to address that climate emergency. And he said that he's been to agricultural shows up and down the country. Of course, we met him at the National Ploughing Championships, Stella, and he's spoken with farmers and he's listened to what their concerns are. And he said the sector is spoken about in a way that no other sector is discussed in those terms. And he said he's sick of farmers being spoken down to and spoken at and being told about what they should do. And he pointed to the importance of biodiversity and food security, but he said we have to move away from the question of are you pro-farming or are you pro-climate? It can't be one or the other. He said we have to be united going forward. Now, of course, you did mention that there is a general election coming up, so all of the parties will be producing their manifestos. Now, although the Fine Gael manifesto isn't concrete yet, he did give us an insight into the manifesto when it comes to farming, and he pointed to certain issues that have been highlighted to him and his party colleagues in recent months by farmers. Those included regulation of the agri-food supply chain, succession, support for low-cost sectors, cutting red tape, and implementing the biomethane strategy. Now, he said that the party had heard farmers loud and clear about the importance of Ireland's nitrates derogation, which he described as a national asset. And he said that working to protect the derogation is one of his most important priorities. And he said that responsibility for retaining this derogation does not rely just on farmers. It's not just an issue for farmers, and that we need to see improvements from the likes of Irish Water, and we need to see improvements in municipal waste. That got another round of applause as well. He also pointed to the need for improvements in forestry when it comes to water quality as well. And he said when it comes to the derogation, it requires everybody pulling on the green jersey and bringing everyone together and having an absolute zero tolerance approach to buck passing from one part of the government to another and from one agency to another. He said it was too important. So what is he going to do to achieve all of this if he is still the Taoiseach after the next general election, Stella? Well, Simon Harris said he is committing to establishing a new cabinet committee on water quality. Have a listen to what he had to say.
And I want to say to you that if I'm given a chance to be part of the next government, I am committed to establishing a cabinet committee on water quality, to drive improvements for my department and to steer a national effort to retain the nitrates derogation. Because pulling together, we can and we will retain the derogation. Farmers cannot be asked to do this alone. I've heard you, I know how to move forward, and I want the chance to work with you on that.
So there you go, Stella. A new cabinet committee is one of the election pledges that Simon Harris has made to farmers. And he also said that he wanted to retain and support the Department of Rural and Community Development. A lot of our readers will be very familiar with that department, particularly from a lot of funding announcements and a lot of good work that has been done locally to support the rejuvenation of local towns and villages in rural communities. And he also did acknowledge the IFA President Francie Gorman's call on the next government to ensure that there is a larger common agricultural or CAP budget going forward. Of course, beyond 2027, beyond the current CAP, there is huge pressure on all of the politicians to make sure that there is a bigger pool of resources for farmers out there. And he actually did point, Simon Harris, to the fact that Ireland will hold the EU presidency from July to December of 2026, which will be a crucial point in those negotiations as well as we look beyond 2027. And he did say if farmers are being asked to do more, they should be supported to do that. And look, it's really laying out his stall. He made big claims as well at the National Ploughing Championship, Stella. And I remember you saying at the time, farmers have very long memories. But it is the season for a lot of election promises. So be warned.
This is for sure. Exactly. I mean, hitting all the right notes there that farmers want to hear. But again, we are in the run up to a general election. And I suppose at the same time, the Taoiseach's party has been in government now for quite some time during a period of a lot of change for farmers where, you know, they felt that they haven't maybe welcomed a lot of those changes. So therefore, it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few weeks, especially when people go to the polls. But another person from the government who was speaking at the IFA farming conference was Agriculture Minister Charlie McConalogue. Now, earlier this week, Minister McConalogue announced a review of the Agri-Climate Rural Environment Scheme, that's known as ACRES. So as we know, Aisling, since the scheme was established, it has been mired in controversy and complaints by farmers, and at times it seemed to have bitten off more than it could chew, really. So what is this so-called review aimed at?
Yes, I mean, in recent weeks, Stella, as you say, there's been so much more criticism of ACRES. You know, there's been delays to payments, the IFA claiming that the scheme has fallen flat in its face and that many farmers are considering leaving the scheme completely, pointing to issues particularly in the cooperation scheme, the ACRES CP farmers that are awaiting scoring and payments and everything like that. And the Irish Nature and Hill Farmers Association said that some farmers who are awaiting their balancing payments for year one of the scheme would have to continue to wait until next year. That was their recent claim as well. So, I mean, that criticism hasn't gone unnoticed by Charlie McConalogue, Stella. He acknowledged the issues with the scheme and he did so with us on the Agriland stage during the ploughing championships as well. And this week came the news, as you said, that there is going to be a review. So the minister has asked his officials in the Department of Agriculture to have a look under the bonnet of the ACRES scheme 2 years into this agri-environmental scheme. Now, he did point to some of the positives in ACRES, which has drawn from the experience of other EIP programs, their European innovation projects that have taken place around the country. And he said that the area now covered by results-based actions has increased from 80,000 hectares to 1.2 million hectares. And the number of farmers implementing such actions has grown from 3,200 to 35,000. So there is an achievement in that, and there is an environmental benefit in that as well, Stella, that we are seeing these results-based actions, that farmers are being paid to carry out these actions, but the results, you know, is what it is based on and the amount you're going to be paid. But he did say that in an overall sense, it's working well for most farmers and that over 247 million euro in payments have been issued to participants since its inception. But he is aware that some farmers may have received lower scores than they were expecting and therefore lower payments. And that, of course, has caused a lot of issues and a lot of the criticism that has come from the farming organisations. And now he did say when it became apparent to him earlier this year that some ACRES participants would have experienced payment delays, which of course was giving rise to concerns about cash flow on farms, that he did approve an unprecedented, as he described it, interim payment. Of course, that has led to its own set of unique circumstances then as well, with farmers being faced with paying back overpayments from the department as well. So that's created its own controversy as well. But he feels that this review, he doesn't want to compromise on the environmental ambition of acres, but he wants to review the experience with the scheme to date and to consider whether it can work better for the farmers who are participating in it. And he said he wants to assess the options and identify ways of advancing the scheme to improve, and in particular for those acres CP farmers who may have a low score. And he said he's asked his department officials to meet with farm organisations, with advisors, with CP teams around the country as well, to get their views, with the view to coming to a conclusion on this review by the end of the year. Now, will Charlie McConalogue be the Agriculture Minister after the next general election? Who knows? But maybe it's a job for his successor. But I think it is something that farmers out there will welcome, Stella, that this scheme is looked at again. And during the Macra National Rally last weekend, the Minister announced that he was committing to examining whether there was a way that he could actually facilitate more farmers to join the scheme. Of course, around 55,000 farmers brought in under those first two tranches of acres. So surprising that he's looking to add more to that figure now as well. And he was saying that his officials might look to see if acres could be changed to allow access for new entrants. Be interesting to see, I suppose, if there's appetite out there for more farmers to get into acres as well, Stella. But that review taking place over the coming months, and we'll have some sort of result before the end of the year, according to Charlie McConalogue.
And staying on that topic of schemes, Aisling, there were some updates on TAMS and SCEP, so that's the Suckler Carbon Efficiency Programme too, this week. Will you give us a rundown of the latest on both for our listeners, Aisling?
Yeah, so during the Macra rally, the minister did announce as well that he was changing the criteria around the grant aiding of robotic milking machines under TAMS. He said he's proposing that farmers would be allowed to apply for more than one robotic milking machine under the scheme, as is currently the case. That was all came out during a question and answer session with Macra members, Stella. And he said he was making the change for reasons of economic viability for farmers. And he said that the issue would come up during his discussions with young farmers, and as a result he was going to change the eligibility criteria for the grant aiding of those robotic milking machines under the TAMS scheme, which of course is the dairy equipment scheme, and that is of course one of the 10 schemes that makes up TAMS 3, and it provides grant aid at a rate of 40% for the cost of investments up to a ceiling of €90,000. So it will be interesting to see if there's a lot of farmers out there who may take up that offer in the next rounds of TAMS. Of course, we have a tranche 5 open at the moment, which will come to a close in early December. So a move there, I suppose. Maybe the minister can't find any more in his budget. Obviously, we just had the budget. So maybe kind of giving a bit more flexibility in schemes is where he can offer some relief ahead of the upcoming election. Now, moving on to SCEP, Stella, and a deadline that is very fast approaching. It's actually tomorrow. Farmers are being reminded by the ICBF, the Irish Cattle Breeding Federation, to make sure they submit their weights to them by tomorrow's deadline. We did get figures recently that as of October 24th, just over 3,000 suckler herds participating in the scheme had yet to record eligible cow and calf weights as part of the scheme. So I'd imagine there was pretty much a deluge into ICBF, hopefully over the last week or so on that, Stella. And of course, a reminder as well, we did mention it last week on the podcast, that you do have to complete that mandatory training as part of SCEP. It is not negotiable. The deadline is the 15th of November. Of course, the department will point you towards the online training as the best option, because you can come and go from it as you need, and make it suit you essentially to do all of the modules in that training course. But as we did say last week, there are additional in-person training events being held by the department in locations in Clare, Cork, Kerry, Leitrim, Galway and Meath. They're taking place between November 6th and 13th. You can find full details on our website and app on those. You have to register in advance and you have to attend the full duration of the in-person training to make sure that you can tick that box for SCEP eligibility. So make sure you do that training online if you haven't done it by November 15th, or if you want to have a look at those in-person training events, check out Agriland.
Moving on now to the future viability of farms in this country. Another story covered by Agriland this week was the launch of Teagasc's annual sustainability report, which focused on 2023. It had some interesting findings in terms of the likes of dairy, beef and tillage. Aisling, can you outline the main points?
Yes, so this is the annual sustainability report produced by Teagasc based on the National Farm Survey results, which came out earlier this year. And I suppose a lot of the findings won't come as a big surprise given the dip in farm incomes that we did see in that survey. So this report tracks the progress of the various sectors in improving their economic, environmental and social sustainability. So under the social sustainability heading, 22% of dairy farms were regarded as experiencing what they termed as household vulnerability last year. And that is a large increase on the 4% in the previous year. And it's also the highest figure since the first report of this type was produced by Teagasc in 2013. So it really does make for stark reading for dairy farms out there. And it, of course, reflects the poor economic performance of this sector last year compared to the previous year. Gross output per hectare fell back to just under €4,500 per hectare. That is down from €6,200 a hectare in the previous year. So it just goes to show how much of a dip there has. And Teagasc said, as a result of all the metrics, only 52% of dairy farms could have been classed as viable in 2023 compared to 93% in 2022. So it really does show the difficult position that dairy farmers were coming into 2024. And we know how that's panned out as well. Looking at the cattle farming side of the house, it was somewhat more stable across most of the metrics used by Teagasc to prepare this report. The gross output per hectare increased very slightly, while the gross margin per hectare saw an increase, and family farm income per hectare in cattle farming systems fell from €372 a hectare in 2022 to €348 a hectare last year. And the number of cattle farms which were deemed viable decreased from 27% to 22% year on year. So I think looking to the tillage side of the house, we did see in the National Farm Survey as well earlier this year that there was a significant dip in tillage incomes. That is reflected in this report. 25% of tillage farm households were vulnerable in 2023. And like dairy farms, that is the highest rate since Teagasc began publishing that report back in 2013. And as a result, what we're seeing on tillage farms, due to the metrics, and we've got the full breakdown on Agriland on this, it's just a lot of figures to go through, Stella. But I think for the headline figure, the viability of tillage farms for 2023, it sharply declined. Only 34% of tillage farms were considered viable based on these figures. And looking at the sheep sector as well, they found that only 14% of sheep farms were regarded as viable in 2023. That's almost half of the figure for the previous year. So, I mean, there's a lot to digest in that report, Stella, but it really does show the pressure that all sectors were under in 2023.
Absolutely. Now, moving on to the Mercosur trade deal with the EU. It's a topic that is always simmering really in the background. It may go through a lull period and then flare up again as progress continues. So the Mercosur deal is a trade deal that was agreed in 2019 that would allow a significant amount of South American beef to enter the EU market every year. Well, that among myriad other trade arrangements. But Aisling, what is the latest on the controversial trade deal?
Well, farming organisations across Europe, Stella, are very, very concerned at the moment when it comes to the EU-Mercosur trade agreement. A joint statement issued by a group of European farm organisations this week has claimed that the European Commission is planning to finalise this controversial agreement at the G20 summit, which takes place in Brazil, which of course is a Mercosur country, in the middle of next month, in the middle of November. So those organisations, which included Teagasc and SEJA, of course, SEJA is the young farmer representative organisation at a European level. They have said that they are strongly opposed to the ratification of this agreement, and they say it's an extremely worrying development for the agricultural community in Europe. And they believe that it would expose farmers in Europe to unfair competition with negative consequences for farmers' livelihoods, wages, working conditions, and employment. Now, it does seem that the mood music from the top level in the European Commission, Stella, is moving that way, that they really do want to ratify it. We did hear from the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. It's very much on her radar. But a recent speech at the University of Brasilia given by the European Commissioner for Trade, Valdis Dombrovskis, he did outline as well. He said he's convinced that an agreement between the EU and Mercosur countries is important both politically and economically. And he said that the agreement would create a marketplace between the two regions with a combined population of over 700 million people, which would be one of the world's largest economic and trade partnerships. Interestingly, though, during that speech, Stella, he didn't really mention a lot of the concerns that have been raised by farmers. He did point to deforestation and sustainability, and he did applaud Brazil's efforts to halt deforestation in the Amazon, but didn't really, I suppose, quell the fears of farmers across Europe. And we know that farmers in France are planning to actually protest in November in Brussels against the Mercosur trade deal. But closer to home, this week we got news that the Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association are going to hold a rally outside the gates of Leinster House in Dublin to protest, I should say, against the ratification of this deal. They say it's a severe threat to Irish agriculture and rural communities. And they have pointed to the fact that this deal would actually allow an additional 99,000 tonnes of beef to enter the EU from the Mercosur countries tariff-free. And Sean McNamara, the president of the ICSA, has called on farmers, agribusinesses and the rural community to unite in defending the future of Irish agriculture and rural livelihoods. That rally will be taking place next Tuesday at 11 a.m. outside Leinster House, and no doubt it will attract some crowd, Stella.
Absolutely. And of course, the Agriland team will be there to cover the protest and will bring you details of it as it happens. And just a final reminder as we close off the month of October that you are prohibited from applying farmyard manure from November 1st. And that closed period is for most areas of the country until the middle of January, and then a few specified areas until the end of January. And just before we sign off on this week's episode, I also wanted to flag an interesting story up on the Agriland site and on the app regarding the origins of the Nuffield tractor. Now, it's an article that's proving very popular with our audience, and we know you enjoy machinery content very much. So if you haven't already taken a look at Justin Roberts' feature on the origins of Nuffield, it's in the machinery section actually of the app and on the website. But that's all we have time for on this week's episode of The Farming Week. Thanks for listening. Please share the podcast with anyone who you think might be interested, and rate the podcast on Spotify or Apple, as it really helps us grow and we appreciate it so much. Thanks to Aisling O'Brien for joining me this week. And as always, thanks to our sponsor, AXA Insurance. Until next week, from myself, Stella Meehan, goodbye and take care.
This podcast is sponsored by AXA Farm Insurance. AXA offers tailored cover to fit your unique needs, whether it's public liability or protection for your family home, outbuildings or farm vehicles. Based in Athlone, the AXA Farm team of agri-specialists and regional managers work together to ensure you receive the seamless support you need. Switching to AXA is easy thanks to an innovative online service that enables you to quickly and easily find the best cover for your needs. For more information, head to AXA.ie. AXA Insurance Stack is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.